Welcome to the show. Have another great show planned for you this week. Chris Regan will be on, the former vice chair of the Democratic Party in the state of West Virginia, also my law partner. We'll be talking all about the election results in West Virginia and how they may affect things in November. First, start off with some of our usual features, and I want to start off with the quote this week, and it comes from Carol Burnett, the actress and comedian, and she once said that we don't stop going to school when we graduate. And I think that's particularly appropriate here in the month of May, and a lot of graduation ceremonies going on, whether they be at the high school level, the collegiate level, or sometimes even the kindergartners have graduations. And there's a lot of truth to that at a lot of levels you don't finish school, you go on to the next grade, whether it be going from kindergarten to first grade, 8th to 9th, high school to college. But no matter what it may be, you never stop really going to school because you never stop learning. And I think that's the point of her quote, is that our entire life we really have an education. We really need to continue to learn and grow, and the only way you really can grow as a person is to continue reading things, meeting people, going places, and taking in all those things and trying to grow as a person. So I know that graduation can be a somewhat difficult time of year sometimes for parents, especially those that have kids graduating from high school that are going off to college, but it's not the end. It just means that they're 18 and that they're going to start a new chapter in their lives, and a very exciting one, and one that has seen them kind of come into adulthood, and they can now see what they have learned up to this point in their lives and how they're going to take that and what they're going to do in the future. So congratulations to all the graduates out there, and remember, never stop learning. Talk about some charitable events. There are so many golf scrambles that happen throughout the spring and the summer, and they're really worthy causes. I golfed for the first time in 4 years recently, and it was only because it was a charity event for the Soup Kitchen in Wheeling. I always like to support that event. I sponsor it every year, even though I rarely have the opportunity to play because of my work schedule. But I did have a chance to play this year and saw Becky Rodacher and so many of the folks there that helped support the Soup Kitchen up at the event, and had a great opportunity to play with my good friends Chris Regan, who will be on the show today, and Mike Anthony, but also Major Harris, former WVU quarterback. Hard to believe it's been 30 years since that 1988 season where he led the Mountaineers to the national championship game against Notre Dame. And I was in 8th grade at the time. Major was my hero. I was a quarterback in junior high at the time, and Major was going on to New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony, and had a great time riding around the cart talking to him, and just amazing to see how competitive he still is. I mean, he's not the golfer that he was football player, but the competitive juices were there, and he wanted to win. We came in 3rd and had a great time, and he made an eagle putt that was that I'll remember for a while. That was about 50 feet, but a lot of fun there. But I'm going to try to have Major on the show sometime in the upcoming months. I talked to him about that, and he seemed really eager to come down and be on the show. So we'll talk all about that memorable 1988 season and his career. But I want to just mention to everyone that if you have an opportunity to support some of these events, whether you're a golfer or not, a lot of times these charity events, whether they be for the Soup Kitchen or the Lions or the Boy Scouts or whatever it may be, oftentimes have opportunities to sponsor them even if you're not a golfer. You can buy a whole sponsorship sometimes for $100. They put a sign up with your name or your business on it. You can sponsor a team. There are a lot of different things that you can do to support those causes. And if the great thing about a scramble is you could be like me and not be a very good golfer and let your teammates carry you because you just play whoever's ball was the best. So even if you're not very good, it's fun to go out and be in the sunshine a little bit, laugh with some friends, and have a good time. So support those events throughout the summer if you can. I always try to do that, and they are very worthy causes. We're going to take a break. When we come back, I'll have Chris Regan with me. We're talking all about the election results. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
When reviewing your oil and gas offers or royalty check statements, do you wonder, am I being offered a fair amount? Do I feel comfortable reading the statement? Do I have peace of mind? If you answered no to these questions, you need Bordas Mineral Management. Our passion is helping mineral owners protect and expand their mineral wealth. Our examiners tell you whether you're being treated fairly and getting paid what is rightfully yours. Bordas Mineral Management. Be protected. Have peace of mind.
Recommended by the highest authorities. Danoon Lumber.
Looks like a bad one's coming. Yeah.
Welcome back to the show. This is my favorite time each week when I have a guest with me, and this week my guest is Chris Regan, who's my law partner, good friend, and also former vice chair of the Democratic Party here in the state of West Virginia. Chris, thanks for being on the show.
Jamie, it's great to be here. It was exciting to play golf with Major Harris, but I thought the most exciting part was when I blindsided him on the 8th tee. Now, of course, I did get him on the ground, but the way he held onto the ball, that was impressive.
We should have had a football there. We blew it on that. I was thinking about that afterwards. That I almost always have a football around in my car or something, but I had just cleaned it out a couple weeks ago and took the football out.
Catching passes from Major Harris.
That's right.
On the Crispin
course. When I get him here on the show, I'm gonna make sure I got a football sitting right over there. We can always use that one. In addition to your legal daytime job, you also continue to be very active in politics through blogging and otherwise, writing editorials and things of that nature, letters to the editor, and of course follow it very closely. And not a ton of contested races, in the primary, but there were some of note, and particularly the U.S. Senate race. On the Republican side, everybody looking to see, okay, who's going to be facing Joe Manchin in November. Of course, he won pretty easily, 70-30, as people thought he would. But even up to the day of the election, nobody kind of knew what was going to happen with that Republican primary. And it turns out West Virginia Attorney General Patrick Morrisey came out on top.
Yeah, and you have to hand it to Patrick Morrisey. I mean, he has now beaten an electoral juggernaut in Darryl McGraw about 6 years ago. He beat a very well-financed and very good challenger, Doug Reynolds, just in 2016. And now he's beaten Jenkins, a longtime fixture in politics, both Democratic and Republican, here in West Virginia, and this Blankenship insurgency. And so he sets himself up very well to potentially become a United States Senator, which is something that if you had said that 7 years ago, a lot of people might have laughed in your face.
Something that's interesting is that, he got a free shot here. And what I mean by that is that his Attorney General seat was not up. It's not up for 2 more years. So he's able to run, and if he loses, he's still the Attorney General. That's right. That's always a nice position to be in when you can run in one of these off-year elections where your seat's not up for something else and still be in the same spot if you don't win.
By contrast, Jenkins is now out of politics when the new Congress is sworn in 2019.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, we'll talk a little bit later in the show about the Manchin versus Morrisey matchup, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with Evan Jenkins now. A lot of speculation that, Governor Justice will not seek re-election in 2020 for the governor's seat. Does Jenkins throw his hat in the ring, and can he do that now credibly after beaten, somewhat soundly here in the primary? Does he have enough, political juice out there to be able to do that? So it will be interesting to see what the future holds for him.
Oh, I think there's going to be an extremely large field for the gubernatorial race in 2020, both on the Democratic side and the Republican side. It's going to be wide open because, as you say, most people who know Governor Justice and then some people who don't know Governor Justice, basically they all agree that he is not expected to run again.
Well, speaking of the United States Congress, let's talk about the race here in the 1st Congressional District. Republican incumbent David McKinley unchallenged in the primary. Of course, he's been in office for a number of years now and has a pretty big war chest built up. But on the Democratic side, maybe somewhat of an upset from what most political insiders thought would happen. Ralph Baxter from here in Wheeling running on the Democratic side, but defeated by Kendra Furshey, who's a law professor down at WVU, and really, by close to 5,000 votes or so, and most of that margin coming from Monongalia County down there in Morgantown, Fairmont, Clarksburg areas. I mean, big Democratic turnout there.
Yeah, right. The numbers game there worked for Furshey, and apparently she also had the views and the digital media campaign that those Democratic voters wanted to see. Because she performed very well. She was outspent by a considerable margin by Ralph Baxter, who was an excellent and credible candidate for that race. But despite the money, she was able to pull it out, relying on the I-79 corridor there. And she's going to have a different kind of race against McKinley, because McKinley is now going to rely, of course, on the Republican strength throughout that district. He's won the seat 4 times, and Furshey is considerably, I think, to the left of where Baxter had positioned himself, and so we're really going to see that race completely polarized.
Yeah, and you mentioned the digital media and stuff. She's very active on social media. I mean, in the last couple of weeks before the election, it was very difficult for me to be on social media or anything without seeing an ad for her popping up, and I think she really personalized herself, in the course of those ads, and showed herself about cutting the grass and things of that nature. And She does have some very left-leaning views, and McKinley really very much a conservative. So you're right, that'll be an interesting matchup to watch. But you know, there was a big amount of turnout there in those counties, and that really made the difference. I mean, of course, Ralph Baxter won pretty handily here throughout the Panhandle, you know, stretching all the way from really Tyler County all the way up through Hancock County. But there just weren't enough votes there. Yeah,
right. Percentage-wise, he was fine. Just not enough total votes. And I think what we're going to see in the race in the fall is going to be whether sort of a real test of a real fire-breathing progressive versus McKinley, instead of what we've had in a lot of these races, which is more of a Democrat who's trying to tell you that they're very moderate, very conservative, very close to the Republicans. So you have those races where the Democrat is standing close to our Republicans getting even farther and farther to the right over the past 10 years. But now you have a Democrat who's saying, well, I'm not coming to you an inch. I'm out there for Medicare for all, raising the minimum wage, and a number of other positions that had previously really not been tested on that kind of a stage in West Virginia that Fershey will be bringing to the voters. And I think it's good for them to get a chance to speak on that.
Speaking of fiery folks, you know, down the southern part of the state, another congressional race, Richard Ojeda, who really became somewhat the face of the teachers' strike on behalf of the teachers in the West Virginia legislature this last term, ran for U.S. Congress and won in a field of 4 people, got the nomination, and he got it by a majority. I mean, 52% to get that type of margin in a field of 4 is very difficult, but he was able to do that, and really, I think has an excellent chance moving forward toward November.
Yeah, Senator Ojeda has come a long way from the middle of his primary contest against Art Kirkendall down there in Logan County a few years ago, when he was beaten up, blindsided and beaten up next to his car. And then he surprisingly won that primary, went on to win the senatorial seat, and now he is the Democratic nominee and has a tremendous following because I think of the positions he's taken, but also because of the personality that he's able to display there and the strengths of his convictions that were on display throughout the teachers' strikes. Excuse me. I mean, the way he's able to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning, out with the people, day in and day out, making sure that they know that he's with them, really impresses people a little bit differently than politicians who've shown up maybe for the dinners and the drinks late at night in a suit and tie.
Yeah, he's his military background, I think, appeals to people too. I mean, he looks like a tough guy. He looks like somebody you don't want to mess with.
Most definitely. You know, I mean, you can't really look at Richard Ojeda and say, oh, look at this stereotypical leftist liberal. He doesn't give that impression at all. But he has very strong convictions, again, on getting health care for all people, raising the minimum wage, making sure that working people and our teachers are front and center. So it's a very interesting niche he's carved out for himself, and he will have an interesting race against, I believe it's going to be Carol Miller in the 3rd.
We need to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue talking about this year's election and what to look forward to in November. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
At Ultra Big Bank, we need to be assured you can make your payments. Yes. Well, buy them out. Acquire. As I was saying, I'm not sure I see the value in your small account.
That's when we went to Belmont Savings. They took the time to understand our needs.
And they didn't make us feel small. Where the big banks are only interested in growing, Belmont Savings' interest was in us.
Belmont Savings Bank, focused on your future.
So, how was your first day?
Long. So, Josh asked me about you.
Daddy's home. Go get him.
For your home, for your life, for more than 50 years. The Hardwood Specialists. DeNoon Lumber.
Welcome back to the show. I've been talking about the election here with my guest, Chris Regan, who's my law partner and former vice chair of the West Virginia Democratic Party, frequent blogger on politics, and letter writers to the editor throughout the state, and you've had a lot of the different papers, publish your letters.
Please, Jamie,
statewide.
op-eds, not mere letters to the editor,
All right,
but
not letters to the editor.
fully presented and thought out op-eds.
They are. They're very well written, and I enjoy them. And I usually catch them. It's funny because I usually catch them in the newspapers or wherever before I see them on our own website or your blog, because they are usually publicized. So
it's great to know people are still reading newspapers.
That's right. Not as often as they used to, but I still do it. I enjoy staying informed. But anyway, let's talk about the West Virginia State Senate. Some interesting shakeup already here. Coming out of the last term, I said, there's going to be some movement here because people aren't going to be happy with what these Republican senators were doing with respect to the teachers, and 3 of them already defeated in their primaries. Didn't even take till the general. You've got Mark Drennan in the 4th lost. You've got Lynn Arvon in the 9th lost. Carnes in the 11th lost. So 3 incumbents there, and it's not like there's only 17 seats that are up. So we're talking 3 just even that were of the ones that were contested too.
Right. Now, 2 of those were appointments by Governor Justice for senators who left their positions or for various reasons, were not the elected senators, in other words. But Carnes, Senator Carnes from the, I believe, the 11th senatorial district, was one of the most strident anti-labor voices in all of West Virginia. He was the guy who, when the unions were protesting right to work down there, said on the floor of the West Virginia Senate that the good working people of West Virginia were out working, and that it was only union members who were lazy or too lazy to be working that were sitting in the galleries watching the proceedings. I mean, you can imagine how that made union workers feel as they had taken time to participate in their government. So he has been dismissed back to Florida from whence he came, and so I don't think you will hear the Robert Carnes name in West Virginia politics again.
Yeah, and interestingly, Mark Drennan, and you mentioned Mark Drennan and Lynn Arvon being appointed, and now, Eric Tarr in the 4th will face Brian Prim, who was just narrowly missed knocking off Mitch Carmichael 2 years ago in the 4th. Of course, Mitch Carmichael, the Senate president, and Brian Prim came ever so close, and now he'll have a chance again, this time to face a political newcomer, so to speak, and then of course Roland Roberts in the 9th will face Bill Wooten, also a name that's been well known in West Virginia politics for a long time, down in the 9th. So you really could see some Democratic pickup there, but certainly there'll be some new faces.
Right. Wooten has had that seat in the past, and then Brian Prim, as you mentioned, very, very close a couple of years ago, and he will not now be facing Mitch Carmichael, who was an extremely well-funded sort of political insider, in line for the Senate presidency, as we saw. So those will both be pickup opportunities for the Republicans. Interestingly, we were talking about McKinley earlier. Normally, you would expect Bob Beach to be very safe as a Democrat in Morgantown, but he is facing Mike Oliverio, who people may remember as the person who kind of delivered that seat to McKinley by knocking off Mollahan 8 to 10 years ago now, it must be. And he has now switched parties to Republican and is running against Beach in Morgantown, where you've got to think he still has some political strength, having won at least that nomination there from one side. Now he's in the other party.
Yeah, the Oliverio name's been strong in that region for a while, so that's worth mentioning. And some other Senate seats, a contested race in the primary in the 2nd senatorial district here in West Virginia. Denny Longwell, who was a guest on this show last week, was victorious in the 2nd. So congratulations to him. I enjoyed having him on the show last week, and he now faces Charles Clements, another person who was appointed to fill a seat, appointed when Senator Leonhardt went and became the Commissioner of Agriculture. So another appointee there. So now they'll be facing off in the fall to see who takes that seat. So that'll be an interesting race to watch as well.
Yeah, 2 Republican wins in a row there. Leonhardt won it, and then Maroney won it. And so it's been a while since a Democrat has won that seat. Jeff Kessler, I think, the last person to win election to that seat. But again, we have 2 newcomers there, so it's more of a toss-up than you usually see.
Some local races from this past election, the primary here, worth mentioning too. Mark Thomas was able to earn the nomination for Belmont County Commissioner on the Democratic side. He's been in the news a lot lately, but acquitted of charges that were brought against him. And he now faces former WTRF reporter Jerry Eschman on the Republican side, who won the nomination there. So That'll be an interesting race to watch in the fall to see whether Mark Thomas is able to retain his commissioner seat.
Yeah, well, I think if you're going to be running for office, acquitted is good.
Yeah.
You know, Blankenship was convicted. I think you ought to find something else to do. He was acquitted, not guilty, and now he gets his chance to vindicate himself before an even larger jury, that of the voters.
You know, speaking of commission seats, also a contested seat in Marshall County where Delegate Mike Farrow, decided not to run for re-election in the House of Delegates. Been there a number of years, but instead ran for Marshall County Commission. He defeated former Commissioner Jake Padlow for the Democratic nomination, and really pretty handedly. And Delegate Farrow has done a lot for the area and the region for a long time. But so it was good to see Delegate Farrow in his first bid, in a more local race, so to speak, be successful in that.
Very popular person in Marshall County, and deservedly so.
And of course, his seat now is up. Delegate Canestraro running for re-election, and now Lisa Zukoff, who ran for Senate 2 years ago, was defeated by Senator Maroney, now running for the House of Delegates. Interestingly, you mentioned how the 2nd Senatorial District hadn't been won by a Democrat in a while since Senator Kessler won, but Marshall County does have 2 Democratic delegates right now, Delegate Farrow, of course, and Canestraro. So Lisa Zukoff's going to try to keep both seats for the Democrats by joining Delegate Canestraro. They'll face Charlie Reynolds, the only Republican nominee in the fall. So,
I think teacher pay is going to be a big issue there. What happened in that strike is going to be huge in Marshall County this fall.
And Lisa Zukoff was outstanding with the teachers. And she led the ticket. She actually got more votes than Canestraro did in the primary. So I think she'll be a solid candidate. And of course, here in Ohio County, the big race was the Board of Education. Really only 1 seat contested. And that seat was won by David Croft, local attorney, who defeated Karen Schuler-Stakem, and Chris Carter retained her seat really unopposed, and Molly Adderhold. So really now 3 new members to the Board of Education. 2 new members joining Chris Carter, and then Zach Abraham and Sarah Kegler, who will still be there.
Right, and a big win with the school bond, I think, passing here in Ohio County. That's really exciting to be able to make those improvements to our local schools. It passed really comfortably. I think people were nervous about it because anytime you're spending money, there's some fear that people will pull back from that. But it's really put to good use in this county, and I'm certainly glad it passed. Yeah,
it passed by 22 percentage points, which is a big win for that. And then, of course, Wheeling City Council will narrowly receive a pay raise in 2020 by like 2 points at one. And the nice thing I think about that was that it's not to give it to them now. So none of the people that are on council now will receive the benefit of that unless they're reelected. So it's not like they were proposing that they get a pay raise right now for themselves. It was, hey, whoever the next council is, whoever's elected will get this. And I think that's one of the reasons that passed.
That should always be a rule for elected officials.
Let's talk about a couple races quickly to look at the fall. The 1st Senatorial District here in West Virginia, both candidates running unopposed. Ryan Fern's the incumbent Senate Majority Leader on the Republican side, and going to be challenged by Bill Ehlenfeld, former U.S. Attorney, kind of first time on the ballot. And that's a race that will be likely well-funded and highly watched here until November.
1 in 3, almost 1 in 3 Republican voters in the primary went out of their way not to check next to Ryan Fern's name in the voting in the primary, and that's a high number for people to be passing over you for no reason when you're unopposed. Not to either be checking your name or voting on a straight ticket. So whether that is the result of the Republicans having opposed the teacher raise and precipitating the teacher strike, or other issues that Ferns may have, it's certainly an encouraging sign for Ehlenfeld's challenge so far.
I venture to say there were a lot of teachers that if they're registered Republican, did not check the box next to his name. Another one that'll be worth watching, of course, is now Senator Manchin versus Patrick Morrisey for that U.S. Senate seat. Been a long time since Senator Manchin didn't win an election. But Patrick Morrisey been very successful in the races he's run. So you talk about well-funded. That is a race where tons of money is going to pour in.
He's got 4 things going for him at least that you can think of. He's the Republican, and most of the Republicans have won the statewide races the last 2 cycles at least. He's got tape of Senator Manchin endorsing President Obama and Secretary Clinton, which is just gold in terms of opposition research. He's beaten some strong opposition to win his last 3 races, as I talked about a little bit before. Most of all, though, he's got Trump. Trump is going to be desperate to keep Senate seats because of the implications for investigations into him and his judges and his agenda. And then also, he likes to do these rallies. And Senator Manchin tried to cozy up to him, took his picture with him, said, I'm going to vote for some Trump nominees, but that hasn't gotten him anything. Trump's been railing against Manchin. And if he comes here and he hosts rallies and he supports Morrisey very strongly, well, he came out to squash the Blankenship thing, and we saw how that worked out for Blankenship. So I think Morrisey has a lot of cards that he is holding very suddenly to reach the top in West Virginia politics. Again, something you would not have expected just a few short years ago.
We'll keep an eye on it. I really appreciate you being on the show. Thanks for doing it, and thanks for all the things that you write out there. It's always fun to read.
It's always a pleasure, Jamie. Thank you.
We need to take a break. When we come back, I'll spend a few minutes talking about sports. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show. People in nursing homes are some of the most vulnerable members of our society. They're there because they can't take care of themselves. Those facilities have a duty to take care of our loved ones, and when they don't, it's important they're held accountable. We've not only collected record results against negligent nursing homes, but more importantly, we've helped so many families get the answers and closure they so badly needed.
Bordas and Bordas, fighting for justice.
We're Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration, and we're gonna save you. We've got it down to a science, an absolute state of art. We do it all, restoration, cleaning, and reconstruction. When disaster strikes, just pick up the phone. We're Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration, and we're gonna save you.
Welcome back to the show. It's time to talk sports, and I've been trying to still get over the disappointment of the Penguins being eliminated. I really thought they had a chance to three-peat this year, but it just goes to show how hard it is to do it 3 years in a row. It hasn't been done for decades, but the Penguins have all the pieces in place with Crosby, Malkin, and others to be able to get it done for the next several years, and they just have to maybe add a couple pieces, shore up some things, but the Caps were just maybe a little bit hungrier than the Penguins, and that's one of the reasons it's so hard to win it 3 years in a row. But been trying to get over that. I did spend some time up in Pittsburgh at the Pittsburgh Steelers Partnership Summit recently, and that was a really fun time and great to be able to talk to some of the folks. Mr. Rooney, the owner, was there, Kevin Colbert, the GM, and Ryan Shazier there. It was great to see him, and he took a few steps and down the stage with assistance. Somebody was holding his hand, but nonetheless, he is fully committed to trying to get back to football, but in the meantime is kind of serving as a scout and / assistant coach, helping some of the guys learn the playbook. And he actually, in preparing for the draft, did reports on some of the guys that the Steelers were looking at. And he was really excited because one of the guys he'd done a report on was Terrell Edmonds, the first-round pick that he was able to announce down there in Texas. And he says that Edmonds is a really good tackler and thinks will help with tackling. And listening to Kevin Colbert, the GM, talk, I mean, I really think, as I had said on the show recently, that Edmonds will be used in a linebacker role to some degree too, and some of those sub packages on passing downs, things like that. So it'd be fun to see how they use him. And of course, Mason Rudolph, quarterback, taken in the 3rd round. Ben maybe not too happy about that, but they really think that competition's a good thing, and Ben's going to be around for a while longer. But they feel like Rudolph was a first-round guy who was still sitting there in the 3rd, and they had to take him to prepare for the future. So that'll be exciting as well. And I did not hear a lot of optimism from anyone that Le'Veon Bell will be signed long term. I mean, they feel like they've given it a great shot, maybe a 25% chance that it happens. Maybe something surprising happens this summer, but he'll play under the franchise tag in Pittsburgh this season, and that'll probably be it for Le'Veon Bell in Pittsburgh is my guess. They've offered him a lot of money, really almost double what any other running back's earning, and it just doesn't seem like it's going to get done. So this will probably be the last year in black and gold for Le'Veon Bell if I had to be a betting man on that. That's all the time we have this week. Thanks for joining in. We'll see you again next week on The Jamie Bordas Show.